People will arrive over the next few minutes, I'm sure, but let's jump in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on co-creating a collection of sustainable business model design practices to support startups. My name is Michelle Holiday. I'll be moderating the session today from beautiful, sunny Montreal in Canada. I apologize, I have a cold and I might suffer and struggle a little bit, but I'm very happy to be with you in this session. I'll say a little bit more about myself and my role in just a few minutes, but I want to start by giving an overview of what this session will involve, so it's clear what you've gotten yourself into in joining us. So there are three components to this workshop. The first component is a series of brief presentations. During the first hour of the session, we'll hear from 5 unrelated expert practitioners from around the world who will share stories about their different approaches to startups and sustainable business models. The second component is co-creation. During the second hour of the workshop, we'll move into conversation in small groups and then together as a whole group to review what you heard from the panelists, but most of all to weave in what you know from your own experience or research. So sorry. The objective of the session most of all is to generate collective insights from the whole group, drawing from your own experiences about what makes an approach to business model design sustainable. And then finally, the third component is synthesis. Following this workshop, a research team will analyze the collective insights generated to explore whether they can be integrated into a research paper. But either way, with or without a paper, we will compile all the insights generated today, and you'll get a copy of them soon after the conference. So the goal of this session is to share stories and approaches with you, but even more than that, it's to generate useful insights together that we can then share with others. And to support that process, we have a really wonderful diversity of panelists today. They will each introduce themselves, but for now, I can tell you that they represent a broad spectrum from helping standard startups, standard as one particular panelist describes them, to find ways to integrate sustainability into their existing models and plans. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have panelists who support social entrepreneurs who want to bake environmental and social sustainability into the business DNA from the beginning. Some of the panelists have a strong focus on the personal development of the entrepreneurs, and others have less of a focus on that and more of a focus on the enterprise itself. And some have a strong focus on community-based entrepreneurship, and others have less focus on that. And surely there are more things they have in common and more things that distinguish them. But these are the things that really stood out from conversations with the 5 of them. What I find most exciting is that our panelists have worked across truly global contexts. And in particular, 3 out of the 5 have experience with entrepreneurship in Africa. So I'm especially eager to see if that cultural context noticeably shapes business model design and maybe even how we understand sustainability. So we're going to run through each of their 5 presentations without pausing for formal questions and answers. The purpose is really to lay out a scattering of approaches for inspiration. However, during the presentations, I'd like to invite you to be extremely active listeners. And what I mean by that is I invite you to write in the chat the things that stand out from each presentation, or questions that come up, or ways that their stories connect with your own experience, or ways that they don't. And then these comments and questions in the chat will support the research team as they write their paper. They'll be useful feedback for the presenters, and they'll also help you to make sense of what you're hearing, and it'll allow you to share those insights with other participants. So the idea is that the co-creation actually starts right from the beginning, even as you're listening to the 5 presentations. So the last thing I want to explain before we get started is my role. At a basic level, I'm the MC. I'm offering this overview of the flow of the session, and I'll make sure we stay on time. But I also bring a particular view of business and sustainability. My own work is based on an understanding of organizations as dynamic, self-organizing living systems. And with that understanding, we start to see the purpose of any business model is not only sustainability, but flourishing, as at least two of the presenters and others say, or even thrivability, as I say in my work. Thrivability as the practice of supporting life's ability to thrive at every level, for individuals, for the organization as a dynamic living ecosystem, for customers, for community, and for the biosphere. Because as I understand it, when we go to the root of what exactly we're sustaining in our sustainable business models, my understanding is that it's life's ability to thrive, that's what we're trying to sustain. So I'll be listening for ways that the different approaches to business model design align with that intention. And I'll share what I've observed at the end of this session. So with that perspective, this is the full question at the heart of our shared exploration today. Which principles, practices, and mindsets make an approach to business model design sustainable or even flourishing and thrivable? Which principles, practices, and mindsets make an approach to business model design sustainable or even flourishing and thrivable? And you might say, I've never heard this word thrivable before. I don't even know what it means. But what I find is that people do know what it means to enable life to thrive. You know enough to explore it as part of today's conversation. So my invitation is to listen to the presentations with this question in mind. And then we'll come back to this question in our conversations during the second hour, and we'll dig even more deeply into it. And the very last thing before we move into the presentation is that I'd like to propose that everyone take a deep breath if you'd like to, mostly just because it feels good, but also because it helps clear our minds for that active listening that I invited you into. Okay, so please do remember to type your thoughts and observations in the chat as you listen actively to the speakers. And I'll also leave about 30 seconds at the end of each presentation for you to share thoughts about what you're taking away. So let's get started. Heaven Bereket, we would love to hear from you first.
Thank you so much for that. And absolutely loved your introduction and structure of things. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here, and thank you for having me. So when I had a discussion about what should I talk about, what should my contribution to be with this, I've been going a little bit back and forth. But I will start off sharing my story, how I, as an African diaspora living in Sweden, see when it comes to different type of business models, being a navigator between Europe and Africa. But first, let me see, and hopefully the technology will work. Nope. There you go. This is me. This is one of my happiest moments in life. The picture might not look like that, but that's actually the same moment my mom told me that we were actually able to stay in Sweden. So I'm born in Eritrea, and my name is Heaven, and it's my dad's preference to have that name. And we ended up to be in Sweden in a city called Kiruna, which is basically the north point of Sweden, which was quite a shock for my young parents. And a little bit of information about me. So I'm a pharmacist and economist, and today I'm one of the awarded female leaders, often within the startups ecosystem in Sweden and usually in Kenya. But also I have this journey on where I wanted to do an impact and really wanted to make sure that I can contribute more than just, going to work. So during my studies, I started to get very, very interested in technology. I really believe it's been one of the life-changing for the humanity. And I started something called Bambino Foundation, where the aim was, it's just an ordinary organization where the aim was to contribute more into health in different African countries. For those who has been in this sector of organizations know it's quite a hell of trying to let people, it's kind of a lot of work to make them donate to your organization, to your cause, but also it's quite a lot of work when you need to do application for scholarships and whatnot, or grants. It's a lot of work. Often you probably spend more doing that rather than the actual impact and change you actually want to contribute. So early in that space, I recognized that this is not the path that I wanted to go. I really wanted to make sure that I founded a sustainable business model that made the Bambino Foundation really not dependent on donations or grants. So I ended up doing this. And I don't know if you know what is this, but this is a chart of the two currencies. I think a lot of you probably heard of cryptocurrencies, but this is Forex currencies. So I find out that there's a way to earn money in a structured way with risk management. And I decided to start another sector during the Bambino Foundation towards being, non-dependent of donations. I started to trade cryptocurrencies and Forex, but that was not it. I also found out that I was quite a good teacher. So I decided to also teach others to actually how to trade. And with that money, we could sufficiently actually make sure that Bambino Foundation could actually thrive. So this was actually more than 10 years ago. It's actually the 11th year. And this is how many people we have graduated, globally, over 2,000 people. We are in 3 countries in Africa, and we have literally students all over the world who have just focused on trying to, someone is not muted, I think, where we successfully have taught other people how to trade. And in that sense, they also have supported Bambino Foundation's organization by supporting over 2,400 children to have full access to free healthcare. After that journey, I started to go deeper into the tech sustainability, because I really understand that there's so many ways, and especially when it comes to learning from the 2 different continents. So as you know, I'm brought up here in Sweden, which lives in Europe, but I do a lot of work in the African tech ecosystem. So we built up an accelerator program in Kenya, because when it comes to ideas and startups, you can find plenty in the continent of Africa. And as well, Sweden is a very strong country also when it comes to scale-ups. They are literally one of the most famous when it comes to scale-ups. So I quickly understood that there's a lot of learnings between this continent, one being a little bit Europe, being a little bit older in doing this type of processes. And you'll probably hear more of the panelists after this. And then we have Africa as a very, very young population. Like I'm 33 and I'm older than 80% of a billion people, if that doesn't say a lot. And at the same time, we have an older population in Europe, has been through a lot, is also having more structured ways. So there's a lot of learnings there. So we decided to do accelerated programs, venture building and skills training in Kenya. And then we matched up with mentors and investors in the Nordics. And this has been very successful, because for now we have the thing I love the most is that for every startup that has gone through this, where we have found this navigation to build this bridge, 3.3 new jobs have been created on average per startup. And you can see a few of the numbers here as well. So a lot of people know, you've probably seen the media, why Africa, why now? And for me, the one thing is it's a young, hungry population. They said that if the continent was a person, Africa continent was a person, it was be 19, while Europe will be 45. So, it's been learnings from different types. And one thing you also have to know is that when it comes to the continent, it's actually midst of the 4th industrial revolution. So we have this fintech with blockchain, IoT, and gaming and AI, who's really, really flourishing. But without even guidance and maybe venture capital to really not just investment in money, but smart investing can actually make this a huge part for the entire content to be actually sustainable. So I wanted to go through just a few of the startups that I think is very interesting when it comes to actually making a change impact and how they actually solved it. So this is a company called Taiken. They're using the blockchain technology and on Ethereum, where they have digital identity management system. And for you who don't know, there are billions of people who are actually outside the entire system or having, they cannot really scale up their own life just because they don't have the digital identity or identity at all. So Taiken startup where they use the blockchain technology and can give people living in refugee camps identity. And once having identity, you can actually start building your life. Another startup that I wanted to show you is called Edjo. And they are tracking the images online because, there's a lot of artists and a lot of, digital art right now as well. So it's really difficult to actually know who owns what. And also here, they found a very interesting business model where they also use new technology where you can actually track your artwork. And it can be in different ways. It doesn't have to be only images, but it can also be any type of research work you also have done to make sure it's a quality stamp, basically. The last startup that I wanted to show is called Ride. Ride is a startup company in Ethiopia. Ride is basically Uber, and Uber really wanted to actually buy the company as well, but they said no. But the business model is totally different because they actually understood how the market in Ethiopia actually worked. So if you know Uber, the driver have their business, and then they pay 25% for each month of their income during that month. That business model did not work in Ethiopia. So this lady who started Ride in Ethiopia, she found a new type of thing of business model would make it much more sustainable. So what she did was that the drivers actually paid in advance to have like a full taximeter on 25,000 bid. And then for every time they reached out that taximeter, then they have to pay 5,000 bid again. And then made her one of the biggest now, because at the same time she was starting this business, there were also 3 others who wanted to do Uber in Ethiopia, but she's actually the one only standing today. I hope I'm on time, but that was me. Thank you. I hope I gave you a little bit of bits of everything by sharing my story and also what's happening in the startups, and also about how we can actually, I want to see more collaboration and, bridge building between the 2 continents when it comes to finance, but also expertise. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Heaven. You are right on time. That's great. So let's take 30 seconds and I invite you to put in the chat any questions, what stands out, what you're taking away from what you've heard from Heaven. And next, we'll hear from Marie. So Marie, you can get ready. And if you to start showing your slides, Marie, this is a good time.
Super. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Let's just
Great.
take 15 more seconds. I'd love to see a few comments in the chat. Thank you. All right, Marie, why don't you get started? And we're happy to hear from you.
Yeah. And my name is Marie Ahlgren. I'm head of customer and business development at a government organization called Almi in Sweden. So this is a Swedish perspective and not an African perspective, but it's very interesting, Heaven, to see your how you connect the two continents. And I'm going to present how we have been working with new offerings for sustainable business models. And nothing happens when I try to go page down here for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why, but now it happens. Our customers are SMEs throughout Sweden in all industries, from startup to expansion phase. And we work with loans, venture capital, and the business advisory services with focus on sort of working with the startups and SMEs for sustainable business models. And my belief is that sort of a true innovative business ecosystem fosters diversity like a rainforest, and it's among companies and within companies. And we all know that startups and SMEs are not small, large companies, but the entrepreneurs faces exactly the same increasingly complex business environment as the large companies, which is a major challenge. Also, my belief is that understanding the numbers of the business model, that the entrepreneur understands the numbers, is key for long-term sustainability. And what this graph shows in Swinglish, that sort of what does a standard business model for a producing company look like? And it's the income statement and the balance sheets. And we work very much with our entrepreneurs with this colors to show, to give sort of an understanding of the numbers, including the cash flow for sustainability. And also, while in developing offerings, the key is to keep it simple and very time effective for the entrepreneur. We've been working for a little bit more than a year. We started with a trend analysis with a Swedish company called Kairos Future. We made an AI analysis and a Delphi interviews. And interesting enough, the Delphi interviews gave much more information than the AI technology, but we gave it a try. Then we looked into the SMEs challenges. What are their sustainability challenges, and created a white paper. And based on the white paper, we did a framework that was based for our development of our services. And now we are in a launch process, and we're starting to deliver to startups and SMEs. And it has been an enormous success. Both our advisors and the entrepreneurs are very interesting and think that, and they give the answer back that this is really making a change for them. So in the white paper, we came to the conclusion that the biggest barriers for startups and SMEs to integrate sustainability in their business models and the corporate governance are these three factors: that they have insufficient knowledge of sustainability, including a lack of definition, so they don't really know how to talk about sustainability. And this in turn then bring the result that it's difficult to set goals and to work out the strategies for the company. We work with this model to the right here, which shows it's a research by Jane Nelson at the Harvard Kennedy School. It's not very new, but what it shows is the importance of balancing sustainable value creation, sustainability for society and the planet, with the monetary value creation. And that's when you really, as a company, can perform and be long-term sustainability. And what the model shows, you can obey the law. Yes, try to obey the law at the lower end, and at the higher end there you work really with strategic collaborations with other partners to solve complex social and environmental issues. So we took this model, and then we looked at what our customers, where are they, the startups and the SMEs, and we could divide them into sort of four personas, more or less. The sustainability passionates, focusing on sustainability, but maybe less monetary creative. And the monetary focus that sort of didn't think about sustainabilities. And the potentials that were not very advanced in any of these areas, or the sustainable stars. And we found that the sustainable stars in our world, in our customer base, is roughly 10%, which I think is pretty good. And that these four personas, more or less, have to work with different strategies in order to balance this monetary value creation with the sustainable value creation. And our new offerings, so that we try to combine then the business development services with financial services. And we've developed 2 offerings, sustainability dialogue and a sustainability workshop combined with the green loan, and a nationwide digital portal where we collect sustainability specialists in our ecosystem that will be available for the startups and the SMEs. The tools we are using are based on ISO 26000, which have 36 sort of sustainability areas here in Swedish, unfortunately. And we combine this with the SDGs and the EU taxonomy. The sustainability dialogue is it's an application where the entrepreneur answers 30 questions, and it's 30 questions about their business, and doesn't have anything with sustainability to do at all. It's about how do you have any employees? Do you have an international business? And if you're a startup, you don't have to answer the questions for what it looks like now, but what it will look like in a few years' time. And as a result, you will be presented by 10 relevant sustainability areas that you can work with. And based on these 10 areas, you have a dialogue with our advisors, and just to sort of understand sustainability. There you have a sort of support for analysis of the relevance of these different areas. And you start to have a dialogue about, okay, what's essential for my company and my business model. We start with this dialogue, and then we can go into a sustainability workshop with the SMEs. And it's the sustainability workshop is more or less the board game, where you work together. It can be a group of the people from the whole team from the startup. And the idea with that is that you work together and come up with a strategy for sustainability. And this workshop can be done either over a physical table, but so far we've only done it in a digital version with the Miro digital whiteboard because of the pandemic. The physical meetings had not been there yet. And it has been very successful to work digital. And our conclusion is almost that it's even better to do it digital. So at the end of this 2 sort of offerings to do the dialogue and the workshop, then we've been discussing the business model. What kind of sustainable business model canvas should we use? And we came to the conclusion, wrong or correct, to use a very simple model. We've taken the Osterwalder model. We added 3 fields: society, stakeholders, and in the middle we put the essential areas that the team of entrepreneurs have sort of come up with. And then we discuss, okay, we've taken these essential areas, how do they affect the other fields in sort of the Osterwalder canvas? And the conclusion is, what is then the entrepreneur's takeaway from this? First of all, they get some kind of aha feeling that, okay, now we understand what's relevant as far as sustainability is for us. And they also come with what areas of sustainability is sort of focusing our focus. And they understand what definitions they should use and what sort of all these standards means in these areas. And they come out with the action plan in order. They've set some goals and they've started to work out their strategies. And also we can provide access to financing. So that was my last slide. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the majority of of the startups and the SMEs do really want to do some very good as far as sustainability is, but they need the words and sort of the definitions to understand how to focus for their future. Thank you.
Fabulous. Fabulous. All right. I've been taking some notes, and we'll take another few seconds, as we did previously, for others to add in. What are you taking away? And what are your questions for Marie? What thoughts does it bring up for you? And what we'll hear next from Ian. So thank you, Marie. If you can stop sharing your screen, and then Ian, get lined up. Take a few more seconds. And Marie, there's the question of whether you're willing to share your version of the business canvas.
Absolutely. I don't know how to share now, but you probably can tell us in the end, or?
Yeah, we'll certainly add it to the compiled materials that we'll share.
Right.
But we can also explore whether we can share it as a file.
And it's a mixture of Swedish and English. I'm sorry about that, but it was still pretty obvious, I hope.
The idea is there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Marie. And Ian Calvert, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And hi, everybody. I'm coming to you today from the bottom of the global south, having had heaven at the tip of the global north, I think she said. I'm down in Cape Town in South Africa. And thank you to Michelle for framing the themes in that. I always love a good Venn diagram, and the fact that you kind of neatly circled some of the topics I'm going to be speaking today. So Further is a platform, really a development platform, and here come the Venn diagrams, for early stage, community-based social entrepreneurs with a particular focus on personal development, without forgetting the more sort of technical business development. And as you'll see from the title of the slide, really I'm going to share a sort of effectively our theory of change as a business, that to build sustainable businesses which have sustainable impact, first you have to build sustainable entrepreneurs. And really that's the story I'm going to share over the next 10 minutes. Further is an evolution of a global program that I helped to design and run for Red Bull, the energy drink, which might surprise you. And I ran it for 6 years, where we started here in South Africa, but we took the program to Brazil, to the US, to the UK, to about 15 countries in total. And as I mentioned, the focus in enabling these social entrepreneurs, the focus was very much not just on the business and technical support, but very much applying a kind of high performance approach to developing the personal capacity and well-being and sense of community of the entrepreneurs, to really help them reach their full potential as impact entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs, however you want to describe that. We worked over those 6 years, we worked intensively with about 200 entrepreneurs on 4 continents. And they all went through an 18-month development journey. It was a kind of an academy program. And on top of that, we also worked with thousands of other entrepreneurs in shorter term engagements through boot camps and workshops. But guiding the principle of everything that we did and now continue to do is the following. And sorry, just to fill in the gaps, at the end of 2019, we, with Red Bull's blessing, we spun off what was a Red Bull program into an independent startup now called Further, which really is now working with other partners, some of them corporate, some of them foundations, some of them philanthropic organizations, that is allowing us to work with a broader community of entrepreneurs. And the principle that we've carried forward is that the people closest to the problem should be the people closest to the solution. As we go through, you're going to meet you're going to see these beautiful pictures of some of the entrepreneurs with. This is a guy called Murundeni Mafumo, who grew up in the northern part of South Africa, in an area where clean drinking water was fairly limited when he was growing up. Anyway, he went to school, qualified as a water engineer, worked for a big municipal water department for a long time, and then quit his job and created Kusini Water, which is now a business that provides drinkable water to communities at risk through mobile solar-powered filtration systems, using macadamia nutshells as the activated carbon to filter the the plant. So he's just to give you an idea of the kind of people we work with. And the reason we believe that people like Murundeni are really the future of the change that we want to see in social impact is that too much of the doing good in the world kind of replicates and almost perpetuates some of the problems that caused, because some of the dynamics that caused the problems in the first place, where you have the privileged world handing down solutions now to the developing world with very good intentions, but unfortunately all it does is it ignores the dignity of those communities. It breeds the dependency again. And really our mission is to try and find a way to enable communities to be the architects of their own solutions. And that doesn't mean we're not applying cutting edge technologies, resources, funding, etc. But it's how we do it that enables those communities to be the heroes of their, or the architects of their own solutions. And so when you're a community entrepreneur like Murundeni, the challenge is not just how to build a sustainable business model, but when you've got the extra weight of the community on you, so you're not just worrying about your cash flow, but you're worrying about how am I going to provide water for my community, you need to have a bigger development framework than just the classic business modeling. And this is a framework that we use. It's a series of cogs. And I won't go, in the interest of time, I won't go through all of them, but really they fall into these three key areas. So very much a focus on the personal development with areas particularly around well-being, purpose, that entrepreneurial mindset, giving you the agility. But then obviously you need those business skills. So you need to know what your business model is. You need to evolve your product and service offering. You need to understand how to measure your impact. And then the third major cog around storytelling is how do you really take that vision, both your own personal mission and the business mission, out into the world. So this is the development framework that we use. And in doing that, when we work with entrepreneurs like Batabile Mpofu, who I'm going to explain in a second, you're really dealing with people who are focused on being married to the problem rather than being married to the solution. They have a personal connection to this problem in the same way that Murundeni did. And technology might change, the context might change, but ultimately these people are focused as mission-driven impact entrepreneurs to staying married to the problem, as the solution might have to pivot and change over time. So Batabile Mpofu, again, grew up as a young girl in rural KwaZulu-Natal, was always fascinated by science, but never really, the school that she attended never had the equipment to really explore chemistry as a discipline. So what she's now done is create a business that provides interactive, exciting chemistry kits for young girls in rural areas so they can set fire to things and blow things up and get them engaged and fascinated in STEM as a subject. This is an amazing gentleman called Neo Hutiri, who grew up with tuberculosis and in a family with tuberculosis. And for his family to receive their chronic medication, they had to go and wait at the local medical clinic up to 3 or 4 hours to be dispensed their medication. And so Neo, again, having qualified as an engineer, developed a concept called the Pele box, which means the instant box where chronic medication is loaded into these lockers that you see behind him. You as the patient receive an SMS on your mobile phone and you can come and collect your medication in 22 seconds as opposed to 4 minutes. Zintle Ngidi works in a community where they grow nicotine-free tobacco and provides employment for a lot of women in rural areas. She then takes the tobacco and converts it through various chemical processes into biodiesel, which is also then ongoingly converted into jet fuel. And she's actually flown in an aeroplane powered by her own jet fuel, which I think is just an amazing story. And then Nhlanhla Ndlovu, who is the ultimate African hustler. He runs a business called Hustlenomics. And what he does is he converts backyard shacks into properly built houses connected to the main houses that that he operates in, and he gets the owner of the house and the tenant of the shack to equally contribute to the upgrade, and that has huge benefits in terms of fire prevention. And really, one of the biggest challenges that these entrepreneurs have is staying married to the problem. And there is such a pressure now, particularly as the whole concept of impact investment grows, that whilst everybody is looking for scalability, too much focus is placed on scaling organizations, when what we really need to be doing is focusing on scaling impact. A lot of impact investment is really thinly disguised venture capital, which sort of worships at the altar of Silicon Valley. And really what that does is it takes Nhlanhla away from his community. By trying to scale his organization, he ends up spending more time in boardrooms and ceases to be married to the problem, but increasingly becomes married to a group of impact investors. And our belief, I think I think it was Heaven who mentioned, the important thing in scalability is replicability, not always scaling one single solution, but taking that idea that might have been generated, in this case in Soweto in South Africa, and adopted and adapted to local contexts in, say, Sao Paulo in Brazil or in India. So really, and I'm sure you'll all be, I am wrapping up now, Michelle. I'm sure you'll be familiar with the concept of a zebra organization, which are small community-based organizations that really put the community and the planet on the same table as profit. So speaking to you from Africa, I thought just to leave you with an image that really what the world needs now is a whole herd of zebras, thousands of zebras, and not a few of these mythical unicorns that we tend to hear about too often. So with that, yeah, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll happily take any questions in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you. And to our presenters, we're not taking open back and forth questions and answers, but you are invited to respond to questions in the chat if you'd like. That can be a sort of side channel. So as we did previously, let's type into the chat key points that really stood out to you from what you heard in Ian's stories, any questions. Curious, we'd love to know more about. And we'll hear next from Ondine. Nice job, Ondine, lining things up. Just take a few more seconds. I love the zebras rather than the unicorns. And I love that that came from Africa. Thank you for making that connection. All right, Ondine, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So this question, how do we design flourishing startups, has, I think, probably been the question, although I didn't have this exact language, that I've been exploring pretty much my whole life. Why startups? I'm a self-confessed serial social entrepreneur. I started my first business at the age of 17 and have gone on to found 7 different social impact organizations across 3 countries. And I've always been intrigued by this journey of an early stage organization, taking an idea and bringing it into the world and watching its impact and its influence. I think it's pretty remarkable. And so what is flourishing? Let's be frank, business practices and business in general have largely gotten us to where we are today, and it's a pretty scary space. And at the same time, business has the potential to enable new futures. But we're going to need big changes, and we're going to need audacious goals. And I believe that we need flourishing and thriving aspirations that enhance the integrity, the beauty and the regenerative capacity of our communities. We need goals that protect our people and our planet for all future generations. And honestly, why would we settle for anything less than flourishing? And so flourishing startups, this is the focus of our work. And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to be in this space. So I moved to Canada. I'm South African as well, about 8 years ago with my family. And at the time I was completing my master's research, which was on exploring lean startup and its application in the impact sector. And from my research emerged this flourishing startup method, which is a framework or a foundation that we believe, and I'm not alone in this work, I believe one of my dear colleagues, Anthony Upward, is on the call with us today. But we believe that that the flourishing startup method has the potential to enable us to build business models aligned to flourishing goals. And for business models, what this looks like are models that don't do harm, models that consider the social, environmental, value creation of a business in equal part to the financial value creation. Businesses that have the potential to be regenerative to our communities and our environment, as opposed to being extractive in nature. And so this is the method we've been testing for the last 6 years around the world. We've worked with over 1,000 entrepreneurs in 8 different countries. We've been exploring the work through running startup programming, so accelerators and incubators and workshops and boot camps. And so in my presentation, I'm going to be talking about these 4 foundations to flourishing business model design, along with some of the methods and tools that we use to enable each of these. So the first is discovering and deepening personal vision and values. And this speaks a little bit to what Ian was talking about. It's the deep exploration of the entrepreneur. As I said earlier, business has caused much of the destruction in our world, but business is led by human beings, and therefore we play the most central role in enabling new futures. As individuals, we're not separate from our work, and we're not separate from our enterprises. Our businesses are shaped by us. They are a mirror, a reflection of the way that we think, our priorities, our strengths, and our weaknesses. Maya Angelou said, "The desire to explore the stars is ambitious. The desire to explore the heart is wise." And today, we believe that we need more wisdom than we need ambition. We see in many startup programs that there's actually a very little focus on an individual's personal development and a meaningful exploration around their beliefs and their values. But we need to view the startup journey from a whole human perspective. One of the participants in one of our programs said, "It's refreshing and validating to hear that others believe in the interconnection between me and my business. This, I believe, is a new concept." Well, I don't believe this is a new concept, but rather requires an intentional and meaningful integration of 2 journeys, the personal and the enterprise journey. People drive businesses, and so flourishing businesses are enabled through supporting the entrepreneur's journey, their personal journey. The next is exploring future and the enterprise's future vision. So if I was to ask you to imagine the world in 20 years' time, and would you think that it was thriving and flourishing, would you be able to imagine a thriving and flourishing world in the future? What we've noticed is, in fact, many people can't imagine a thriving future. And when we talk about the world in 20 years' time, this is often the image that is conjured up. So how do we expect to be able to build flourishing enterprises when we can't imagine flourishing futures for ourselves, our businesses, communities, and our planet? if you think about all the movies that are set in the future, they're all apocalyptic. And so we really need new exploration around what the future looks like. So when we're exploring this future vision with entrepreneurs, we're not writing a 3-line vision statement. We're really exploring futures that our business can enable. We get entrepreneurs to interview and speak to thought leaders, to do research, to build out future business models aligned to flourishing. We also get them to explore science and life-based design principles. And these shape the exploration of the future. And they can give us a lot of hope and inspiration for what we're building. These are a couple of the sources that we draw. Oh, there we go. That we draw some of the design principles from, and I'll certainly share my slides so you can have a deeper look into this. But if we can't imagine different futures, we can't be expected to get there. And so it's important to consider. The next is, where are we now, exploring the current situation? And how well do you think entrepreneurs understand the present context of their business idea? In our experience, they actually have a very siloed perspective of their current context. It's a siloed perspective because most often when they're doing research around what's happening today, it's obviously through their own worldview, and it's full of bias and their own perceptions. We don't find that in exploring today's context that a lot of entrepreneurs take a systems-based approach. And so they're only seeing their idea through a very, very small kind of context. And many of them also don't understand the history of their current context. And so perpetuate potentially practices that have caused a lot of harm in the past. Not having a deep understanding of your current context is often what leads to unintended consequences. And there's been a lot of these unintended consequences that have been perpetuated through business models today. So we use important tools like the Impact Gaps Canvas to help entrepreneurs to get a systems perspective on the ecosystem and what it looks like currently, to reduce this bias. We can't build flourishing enterprises without really deeply understanding where we are today and how we got here. The next is co-designing and validating the next business model. And we call it the next business model because a business model represents a snapshot in time. And when we're designing business models, we're not designing a current model, we're designing something in the future, normally 6 to 12, maybe even 2 years out. And so we call this the next business model. And this is where folks get creative, they get messy, it's exciting, it's where most startup programs are focused. And there are 2 core parts of this kind of stage of the journey, and we see across all programs. The first is the business model, and the second is validating that business model. So in many of our programs, we do this really great activity where we ask participants to design their own lemonade stand. And we give each group, we split participants into groups, and we give them a different canvas to work on. And they don't know this while they're designing their lemonade business. They all come back and they present back based on the canvas they use. And what do you think happens? Well, we demonstrate explicitly how design tools shape the model. Tools really matter, which is why we use the Flourishing Business Canvas. It's aligned to flourishing goals, and it provokes us to ask questions that support the exploration of flourishing enterprises. The second part is validation, testing your model. And in Lean Startup, they talk a lot about what they call vanity metrics. And this is going out and doing validation work that is often fairly self-serving, and it just confirms bias. But validation aligned to flourishing goals is human-centered, it's humble, it's empathy-driven. It's this beautiful dance between going deep and learning about the needs of those that you're serving and the types of creative solutions that you are going to be building to meet those needs. And these are the two biggest gaps that we see in the startup support in designing the next business model, using tools that only enable financial outcomes and validation not centering the authentic needs of those that the business is serving. And finally, there's the secret sauce, and we call these flourishing competencies. And they're the critical ingredient because no tools or methods or approaches are useful if entrepreneurs don't have high proficiency in a new set of startup competencies. And we're seeing this emerge in our work, and we believe that this certainly enables the next generation of flourishing business models to emerge through entrepreneurs that display and embed and embody these competencies. And you can see that they're not the typical startup competencies that you might see in a lot of the programming that you may have encountered. So for me, I see entrepreneurship as a form of activism, a bold and brave opportunity to become role models for our communities and stewards of our planet. Thanks for joining me today. And I'm going to leave you with a final question. How are you enabling the possibility for flourishing in your own world, in your communities, and of course, for our planet?
Fantastic. So good. Thank you, Undine. Thank you for that. We'll take a moment to type into the chat praise. Praise is welcome for our speakers, and questions and what stands out. What are you taking away? It's useful to make a note because by the time we get to the final presenter, it's hard to remember sometimes what the first presenter shared. So this is part of the purpose of noting a few things. And our final presenter will be Fyodor Ovchinnikov. And Fyodor, you said you don't have slides. Is that right?
I might share a couple of, I don't have a presentation.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, I have it, but I don't want to show it. You know, I have slides but for different reasons, but I just wanted to have a more casual conversation. Okay.
Perfect. All right, let's hear it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Great. So thank you, Undine and Michelle, for inviting me to be on this panel. And thank you to my fellow panelists. Wonderful presentations and quite a few things I deeply resonate with. So let me maybe just offer a few thoughts and also references to some academic research and some things that we use in practice. And I don't want to share it as a system from our perspective. I would rather share it as a number of insights that you can sense into and take whatever resonates with you and see how you want to deal with that. So a little bit about my background. I've been educated at Moscow State University, bachelor's and master's in Asian and African studies, international economic relations, plus intercultural communication, Russia, China. And after working in intercultural communication for a while and establishing my own organization, so I moved into multi-stakeholder dialogue and systems change. And I'm currently co-running a training organization with my mentor and co-founder Manuel Manga, and the organization is called Institute for Evolution Leadership. And we basically develop leadership competencies for systems transformation. Primarily, we work with organizations designing custom educational programs for organizations that contextualize these programs in certain contexts. For example, we developed a module of a program for volunteers in Asia and train their trainers to teach that module in China to leaders of organizations dealing with rural childhood education in China. So things like that. But we also have a few of our signature programs, including a fellowship program where we work for over a year with a number of fellows from different place-based, with different place-based initiatives aimed at systems change. And this is how basically through this work and through collaborating with organizations like Goodler Foundation to design accelerator programs, we've been exploring ways to support social entrepreneurs that are really taking systems lens to what they're doing. And this is connected very much to what Yin was saying about zebras versus unicorns, right? So when you actually are supporting entrepreneurs that are deeply grounded in their local context, in their communities, then you need to notice certain things that are not necessarily Silicon Valley type of startup wisdom, right, that they're actually working on. And over these few years, some of the most helpful support from the academia that we found was in two main sources. One is research by Dr. Krzysztof Dębik and his colleagues, Jody York, and then Daniel Chmielewski and Jennifer Beckett. It's a research on sustainable business models, and this research is basically based on an emerging on research done in the emerging field of sustainable business models. And Anthony Alport, who's here, is one of the pioneers, I think, in that field as well. What they did, they studied 50+ organizations in the Philippines and Indonesia, organizations that successfully addressed some of the systemic issues in the region. And they used grounded theory approach. So they basically collected data without hypothesis. So they did not have a preconceived notion of what result they would get or what they need to confirm. So they gathered qualitative data about what these organizations did, and they've noticed certain patterns. And there is this research on types of value creation links, etc., and the business models, and they call these models reorganizing business models. And reorganizing business models are models that address an interconnected network of needs that evolve over time. So when we actually come to a community and we try to apply traditional design thinking or a lean startup approach, and we try to develop a solution for a specific need of a very specific customer segment, systemically, we tend to depend on the problem that's there. We're not addressing the conditions that are keeping this problem in place, right? And this approach supports usually solutions that are addressing symptoms rather than root causes, right? And with this, we basically, the best case scenario, we actually keep things as they are, addressing symptoms and lowering the pain created by the system. And in the worst case scenario, we also have unintended consequences at the end. And Tom's Shoes is a great example of that, with shoemakers driven out of business because of this buy one give one model, and shoes that are flooding some certain African communities. So if you are there, and if you are trying to address an interconnected network of needs that evolves over time, you have a problem here, and you have several problems actually here with traditional startup approach or entrepreneurship approach. First of all, it's not just one customer segment, it's multiple stakeholders, right? So if you only focus on the customer segment and you don't, focus equals power, diversification equals risk, you just pull your resources together to address this one laser focused thing, and you don't have the capacity to address this systemically, right? So you need to take on the role to actually host the system and do the sensing, right? Across multiple stakeholder groups, which is not conventional wisdom, and it's not supported by a lot of programs, funders, etc. Because why? You have to just focus on what you're doing best. So it's not just one customer segment, it's different stakeholders, and this is a different concept. And even if you're a social enterprise, even if you're not a nonprofit, even if you're revenue driven, you need to take responsibility for that context locally, right? Then also, it's your business models would be temporary, right? Because if you are working on systems change, then ideally the system will change, which would make the conditions different, that would stop creating the problem that you're trying to address. And in this case, your solution would become obsolete. So you need to be ready to give up the comfort of your business model relatively soon, ideally, and the sooner the better. And when we talk about creating sustainable social enterprise and saying, oh, these people who are addressing these issues locally, so they have to get some wisdom from Silicon Valley investors, and you need to be an investor first, and then you can become an impact investor, because otherwise you don't understand money. We are actually negatively impacting that capacity to create temporary business models that could be crucial in shifting the conditions that created the problem. And we encourage, actually, unintentionally, mostly, the creation of enterprises that would depend on the same problem over the long run. Then, at the same time, so it's temporarity, but at the same time, also some changes take a long time to actually happen. And these could hinder the capacity to get return within a usual time frame, right? Especially when we're talking about venture capital, 3 to 5 years, in most cases, is absolutely out of question, right? So you need longer time to see longer changes in place. And that's why, fortunately, we have now things like patient capital, like Ejido Verde in Mexico, for example, a regenerative forestry company. They secured investment for 100+ years from institutional investors who are basically investing for their grandchildren, wealthy families. And now they have the capacity, having this core investment from patient capital investors, they can have the capacity to invite other investors to invest for 10+ years. And it's okay, you want to be part of that journey for like a short term, 10 years, short term, right? The minimum. So this is a second one, right? But in most cases, when entrepreneurs who are trying to address these solutions through temporary business models, but at the same time, these temporary business models would coexist and co-evolve and change over time, staying in local community, achieving long-term impact. So these companies need support, including investment, that would be aimed at long-term returns, not short-term returns. And that's a problem in many cases. Then, of course, they need to have multiple activities. It's not about one product or service. This is connected to actually attending to the needs of multiple stakeholders. And right, they don't have to do everything by themselves. They can develop partnerships. They can find synergies with other organizations. But very often, what happens when when such companies start and then they remain married to the problem, as Yin was saying, not the solution, but the problem. And this problem is complex and is created through, by systemic conditions. So what happens is that they start developing activities in-house that are complementary, that are actually addressing things from multiple perspectives. And this means that they have spin-offs. So they ended up being multiple organizations with different leaders and different executive directors and of CEOs addressing these perspectives. Also, very often they need to blend market-based and non-market-based activities. So usually when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's entrepreneurship. And even if you're a social entrepreneur, you have to kind of be confined by the market mechanisms. It's like, otherwise, like you're distracting yourself from creating a social enterprise. And when we are working in communities and when the purpose is actually increasing the well-being of the community by addressing complex needs that evolve over time, then you need to be mindful about what other aspects need to be taken care of. It could involve activism with the government. It could involve collaborating with nonprofits. It could involve a social enterprise model combined with a nonprofit model, right? And then also emerging strategies. So this basically, when we're talking about theories of change in social enterprise and philanthropy alike, it's very tempting to have a theory of change that has predictability power. And when we're working with community, nobody can know what patterns will self-organize in that system, right? But we can know that if we create the right conditions, and if we work with the community collaboratively to design these solutions, then the patterns that will self-organize in the system through different reorganizing business models will probably make life a little bit better from the stakeholder perspective than it is now, right? But we cannot come to a funder or to an audience and say that, oh, we promise that in certain number of years, this is exactly how the system will look like, right? There's no predictability power. And in most cases, we cannot even say that after we do the sensing, right? And then the sensing is another thing. We need to do the sensing. And how many programs or how many support systems really encourage us to do the sensing? You know, stakeholder interviews, how many, 100 or whatever, right? One case study from Dr. Dembeck's research, Health and Harmony, which is a very well-known organization in Borneo. It's in some books and articles already. So they spent 400 hours in just listening, 400 hours before they even started designing anything. Within I think about 10 years, they almost eliminated illegal logging, cutting trees illegally in the area, which was one of the main causes of biodiversity problem, especially with orangutan extinction risk. And at the same time, they improved community healthcare and they improved situation with poverty, right? So you see, these are interconnected issues. People cut trees illegally because they need to survive. And why do they need to survive? Because they're poor, and especially the healthcare is extractive, the healthcare bills are enormous. So they have to cut trees, their community health deteriorates even further. So they have to spend even more money on healthcare.
Good, yeah. I have to cut you off. Lots and lots of goodness. Yep. Tough to squeeze it all in. Yes, yeah, thank you for all that.
1 minute?
No, it's fast. My little raised hand was your signal that it was 1 minute, but thank you. And I took lots of notes, and people know how to reach you. So
if I may just finish with one thing. So talking about the tools, we found only one tool that is business modeling tool that supports that kind of business model design, and that's Flourishing Business Canvas that Ondine was sharing. So if you're exploring canvases, that is highly recommended.
Perfect. Okay. So lots to think about, lots of inspiration and good stories of priority and context. So it's time now for us to move into active conversation and co-creation, where our intention is most of all to draw from your experience and perspectives and your research. So we're going to get into breakout groups of about 4 people each. You'll receive, in just a moment, you'll receive a pop-up invitation to go into a breakout group. And just as a reminder, this is the question. I've put it into the chat. Which principles, practices, and mindsets make an approach to business model design sustainable or even flourishing and thrivable? This is the question that we're exploring in our small groups. And to do that, and in particular, to leave a trail for our own benefit after the fact. Oops, thank you. I sent it only to Ondine. So let me send it to everyone. Here we go. That's the question. So in order to leave a trail for ourselves and others, we're going to use this platform, this collaborative platform called Jamboard. And I'm going to open it up and then share my screen to show you quickly how it works. All right, I'll give you a quick demonstration. It is intuitive, but here's a quick tour. So when you are invited into a breakout group, there will be a number associated with it. It will be room number 1, room number 2, or group number 1 or 2. So you'll have to find by using these arrows up here, which is your room number, which page is associated with your group's room number. And then throughout your conversation, you can either elect one person who will take some notes, or it can be a creative free-for-all. Anyone is welcome to add notes and thoughts here. The easiest thing is to add a sticky note. This is a sticky note, and save. And you can make them different colors. You can move them around. You can change the size. You can also draw or write words in that way. That's a little trickier. You can upload images from your computer or from the internet. You can use shapes. You can make a text box and write things in that way. And you can erase as well. This is the eraser. So quite intuitive and can be fun and creative. So this is a way to take some notes from your conversation. What else? So we won't be able to hear from all groups when we come back together. We'll take about 20 minutes in these breakout groups. We will hear from a few, but because we won't be able to hear from everyone, it will be really useful if you're able to take some notes on the Jamboard. And that's it. I'll send you a message when you've got about 3 minutes left to let you know, try to bring your thoughts together. The presenters will be scattered throughout the groups, so you can cross your fingers to get one of them in your group. And I think that's it. Ondine, it's a good time to share the invitations to the breakouts. Perfect. Enjoy your conversations, and I look forward to hearing what comes up in them. And Ondine, we may need to assign the speakers to rooms manually. And is anyone able to pause the recording? We don't need to record this part.